Hi, so we're back for part 6 of the information about Reiki, and during this part I'd like to start with the origins of Reiki, which, as I've mentioned already, this is coming from a universal divine source, so it should be no surprise that Reiki actually is thought to have many origins, and hands-on healing techniques have been around for centuries and have been known by many cultures. When you read about Reiki in books or on the internet, you'll find several different theories about just where it came from, such as the stars, Lemuria, Atlantis, Egypt, India, Tibet. What we do know for a fact about more recently is that Reiki was rediscovered in Japan by a Dr. Mikao Usui during the beginning of the 20th century. So for us Westerners, there are 3 persons that play a vital role in the history of Reiki, specifically the Usui Reiki, and that would be Dr. Mikao Usui, Dr. Hayashi, and Mrs. Hawaii Takata. So as for Reiki history in the Western world, a couple of years ago, we only had Mrs. Takata's version of the Reiki story here in America. This version is still widely taught, although there seems to be many points in her story that can't be verified. When Mrs. Takata brought Reiki to the Western world after World War II, it might have been possible that she had to modify and westernize Reiki history to better suit the times, and that was so that people would accept it even here. I'm not going to relate that version here, but you can find many sites and resources along with versions of the histories of Dr. Mikao Usui, Dr. Hayashi, and Mrs. Hawaii Takata. As for Reiki in Japan, it was many years believed that the practice of Reiki had died out in Japan, but now new information about Reiki in Japan is starting to come to light. So Japanese Reiki system is slightly different from the Reiki that is used in the West. Written and oral information is translated from Japanese as it becomes available, including Dr. Usui's manual, and there are now a few books available covering these new findings. As mentioned before, these 3 people played a vital role in spreading Reiki to the world. And what I've noticed about Dr. Usui's story too is there's a couple of slightly different versions even of that. This is I said before, trying to get information about the wisdom quote by the 5th Dalai Lama. You know how information can be changed over even a couple of years, altered, and so hopefully we can, pretty soon find accurate information on this. But as far as we can ascertain right now, was Dr. Usui, who was teaching a class and who was also getting into the thoughts of Buddhism and trying to find out more about the spirituality that went along with it. And in his doctoral studies, a student asked him how this healing actually worked. And so what Dr. Usui did was he went out for a long meditation, and I believe it was 21 days, and asked this question and asked for an answer to this question. And in doing this meditation was given the concept of Reiki, which was passed on to the other two. And so Mrs. Takata was the one who eventually brought it to America and began spreading the concept here too. So it was going on in both sides of the globe. And Usui Sensei, his dates were from 1865 to 1926, if that helps you to find any more information in the research. He was born in the village of Tanai, Mura. Now, I'm not a Japanese speaker. This is in the Yamagata district of Gifu Prefecture, Kyoto. So, let's see, they're saying that he probably came from a wealthy family, and so was able to get his good education. He studied at Tendai Buddhist Monastery School, entering at an early age. He was also a student of different martial arts. His memorial states that he was a talented and hard-working student. He liked to read, and his knowledge of medicine, psychology, fortune-telling, and theology of religions around the world, including Kyoten, the Buddhist Bible, was vast. He married, and his wife's name was Sadako. As I said, I'm not too literate with Japanese, but they had Sadako. They had a son in 1907 and a daughter. Usui Sensei traveled and studied to Western countries and in China several times. This was encouraged during the Meiji era and later to study and learn Western ways as well. And during his life, Akaio Usui held many different professions, such as public servant, an office worker, industrialist, reporter, politician, secretary, missionary, and supervisor of convicts. How interesting, huh? He worked also as a private secretary to politician Shenpai Goto, who was secretary of the railroad, postmaster general, and secretary of Interior and State. And at some point in his life, he became a Tendai Buddhist monk or priest, what we call in the West here lay priest. On several occasions, he took a form of meditation lasting 21 days. on his memorial, it says that at one time this took place on Mount Kurama, or Saddle Mountain, and this is where he was supposed to have been given the inspiration for his system of healing, which was then called Reiki. It's very likely that he incorporated ideas and knowledge about healing from other systems, both spiritual and physical, like Chinese medicine, other medicines, as he was a doctor, and other Eastern healing systems like Qigong and the Japanese equivalent Kiko, acupuncture, and others. So you might want to take a look at some of these other systems too, as they are very, very similar. I've done quite a bit of reading on Qigong, and there's a couple different ways to spell it, so I'll spell it out for you. You can either go with the Qigong, or we can go with CHI, then GONG, or the way Kiko is pronounced too is KIKO. So you might want to look under all three of those. Makayo found that the healing techniques contained within his spiritual system worked well on various ailments. In April 1922, he opened his first school and clinic in Harajuku, Tokyo. Usui had a small manual, which is now translated into English and published by Western Reiki master living in Japan. His name, Frank Arjava Petter, under the title The Original Reiki Handbook of Dr. Makayo Usui. Makayo Usui's skills as a healer and teacher must have been very good, and his fame spread quite quickly throughout Japan. This was a time of great change in Japan, and they were then opening up to the West with changes both in government and religion. His teachings became popular among the older people who saw him as they returned to old ideas and spiritual practices. His school and clinic was formed not just for the spiritual teachings, but it was also a way for people to obtain healing. As people in general at this time in Japan's history were very poor, healing sessions were quite cheap or free. And according to Japanese history articles, healing and other similar practices at that time would be given for minimal cost, or rather more likely free. So this was the attitude that Dr. Usui took. Reiki students seem to have worked with a teacher as sort of a payment. A small monetary fee might also have been involved. The Usui teachings included teaching people how to heal themselves, which is a very central point still in existence with Reiki today. Healing would be given to them, then they were taught how to heal themselves. In 1923, on the 1st of September, an earthquake shook Tokyo, and it measured 7.9 on the Richter scale. The epicenter was 50 miles from Tokyo, and over 140,000 deaths were reported. The majority were killed in the fires started by the earthquake. It was the greatest natural disaster in Japanese history, and Makayo Usui and his students started to give healing in the area, and the demand and need for Reiki was so enormous. As a result of his work, he, of course, became quite a bit more famous. In 1925, Usui had become so busy that he had to open a new, larger school outside Tokyo. As he traveled widely, his senior students would continue with the work when he was away from the school and clinic. And Dr. Usui passed away on March 9th, 1926 at the age of 62. Later, his students created and erected a large memorial next to his grave, describing his life and work. So much of the new information about Usui Sensei comes from the translation of this memorial. Usui Sensei's teaching were divided up into 6 levels. Shoden has 4 levels. Okyuden has 2 levels. Shinpiden, the beginning level student Shoden, had to work hard at increasing their own spirituality before beginning to move on to Okiden, which is the inner teachings level. Not many students reach the next level, Shinpiden, the mystery secret teachings. It is reported that he taught his system of healing to well over 2,000 people, and what we in the West call Reiki masters. No such title existed in Japan at that time, to 15 to 17 persons. I also have a history of 2 other people that he taught this Reiki, and I'm not going to get into describing their whole history. There's quite a bit of information, and looking at this, I can't really be sure, I want to be putting out, the right information if I'm going to be talking about them, and I'm not so sure that all this is, accurate. So I'm just going to tell you the names here. There's Chujiro Hayashi, Dr. Hayashi, Hayashi. He is one of the main students of this Reiki. And we could also look up Awayo Takata, Hawayo Takata, and she was the Reiki master that came to America. So if you like, you can look them up and see what you can find about their history. So what we have now is a bunch of different forms of this same principle that Dr. Usui started when it comes to Reiki. There are so many forms of Reiki out there right now. There's crystal Reiki, there's angelic Reiki, there's the Ascended Masters, there's a Reiki for probably every different god and goddess out there, but basically they're all coming from the same place that Dr. Usui brought back, for everybody. So we can kind of think of it that way. You know, they're all kind of coming from this same source, and they're all going back to and trying to get in contact with this same source, which we can all think of as this God source, the universal source of light. So there we have it. You know, whether it's coming from India or Japan or Tibet or Mrs. Takata, or however the stories might have been changed, because what happens is that, you know, a lot of people jump into that water, and then the water gets muddy, and it can be kind of hard to decipher exactly where that come from, but we're back to the whole principle of the thing, is that it's coming from a divine universal source, no matter which way you look at it. So for anybody who might have their E key stuck, or their D key stuck, or their F key, or whatever key on your keyboard, as you're starting to get more spiritually aware, or, you know, going on that path, or changing your frequency. And that's what it's all about, is changing your frequency. And so that's just the way it goes. Then our computers malfunction, and your J key is stuck in your K key, and so that's kind of what I would say is the mystery of it, and we're not maybe supposed to know. So I'm going to go on to the usual grounding, and we can end with that. And so next, just, you know what to do next. Take a deep breath in through the top of your head this time, and out through your heart. And I'm just going to this time send the light energy quietly, since you know what I'm doing. Namaste.